This is a park. Or it used to be. And this isn't just any park. It's one you learned about in school, but it was never supposed to be a park. It was always intended to be housing for the University of California here in Berkeley. Though after more than 50 years, that still hasn't happened. And despite rising homelessness, some of the highest housing costs in the nation, and limited places to build, opponents of this project say that it should remain a park. Is this just another form of NIMBYism? Is it capitalism run amok? How did a construction site become a park? Is this crazy Californians gone too far? Why are there so many that support this project so strongly? And why are there so many that oppose it even more aggressively? And how did this one tiny park become the center of a countrywide fight? I'll admit, when I first saw this news, I thought I had a pretty clear idea of what was happening and which side I'd be on. And maybe you do too. But I was wrong. There's a lot more to this than you might imagine. Most of the articles I read about this just cover recent developments. But how we got here is even more interesting. And you deserve to know.
This is a fence, and behind the fence is where the park used to be.
The story begins in 1967, when the university got a bunch of money to buy and develop this land. Back then it had houses on it, but they were able to acquire it through eminent domain. This is basically a forced sale of private property so it can be put to public use. And Cal is a public university, so they can do that. Then in 1968, the university started demolishing those houses, but they quickly ran out of money and left behind a field of debris, mud, and grossness. A year later, the community got fed up with this nasty lot. They organized independently to develop a park. The real goal was to create a place to organize, have a rally, and come together as a community. They promoted all forms of free speech. And this is Berkeley in 1969, the epicenter of the free speech movement, opposition to the Vietnam War, and the Summer of Love. The community cleaned up the debris field, and thus, People's Park was born. But this is where things turned violent.
So anyway, the people in this area finally understood that their survival depended upon fighting back.
Almost immediately after the park was finished, on May 15th, 1969, the police cleared the park of all pedestrians and made multiple arrests. That morning, the university put up a chain link fence and destroyed much of what had been built by the community. That afternoon, thousands of protesters marched to the park and clashed with police. One man, James Rector, was shot and killed by police on a nearby rooftop. Rector was in town visiting friends and climbed on the roof to get a better view of what was going on. In the chaos, police suspected that people on roofs were throwing chunks of concrete down on them, though no evidence of that has ever been found. Another man, Alan Blanchard, was blinded by buckshot, not birdshot. 128 more people were admitted to local hospitals with serious injuries. Then California Governor Ronald Reagan declared a state of emergency and sent in the National Guard. The event would come to be known as Bloody Thursday. People's Park has been at the center of many controversies ever since. Quick side note, many of those images were taken by this man who wasn't protesting. He's a photographer who was there trying to take pictures of the events to make it as a photojournalist. And though he wasn't involved in the protests, he was still arrested. Hopefully that doesn't happen to me. Though Brown was a journalist, and I am definitely not. I just found some really cool resources that no one was sharing and thought you should know about them so you can make up your own mind on this topic. If I get anything wrong, or if you just have some info to add, please let us know in the comments. But I'll only respond if you're nice about it.
So the park isn't there now. It's been replaced by some asphalt and leveled off ground and some ruling class grass. You can tell it's ruling class grass because it's overly shiny and very, very neat.
Fast forward to 2023, and the university put up a chain link fence around the park and started site work. But protesters ripped that fence right down and vandalized a bunch of construction equipment. According to the university, $1.5 million worth of damage was done. And for the safety of people working at the site, construction was stopped. So this year, the university upped their game. While students were on winter break, police came and cleared the park. Crews immediately began excavating the site and stacking a row of shipping containers too high around the entire block. And what pissed a lot of people off was just how similar this event was to Bloody Thursday. Police come in, build a wall, kick everyone out, and start changing the site. The university said this was necessary given the aggressive protests that have happened even recently. Opponents said they went too far, and given the current legal injunction and uncertainty over the future of the park, this was all premature. We'll talk about that later. Fortunately, no one was killed or injured this time around. Both police and protesters remained peaceful. Some arrests were made, but those people were quickly released. Today, the park is closed, even though the university can't start legally building yet. The Daily Cal broke the news that keeping the park closed is costing the university a lot of money. They're paying California Highway Patrol $3 million over the next few years to protect the park. And the UC system is of course publicly funded. So if you live in California, your tax dollars are paying for these shipping containers and all of these police officers. What I saw when I visited the park was an entrance on each corner and 2 to 5 security guards guarding the entrance. About half were just chilling and sharing photos of people that they had taken walking by and making fun of them. The other half seemed to be doing their job. These 2 guys said hi to me and were nice. And you may have noticed, these are not the $3 million CHP officers. It's some private security firm. Amongst all of this protest is a housing shortage. Even most of the protesters admit that the university, Berkeley, and the state of California need more housing. And there aren't that many places that the university can build housing, though they have identified some other suitable locations. But they like this one the best, and it's where they want to build first. The area is flat, close by, and they own it, so they can do whatever they want with it. Of course, this means there isn't a ton of other public park space nearby. But get this, the development plans for this property should make everyone happy. It includes space for 1,100 students at below market rate rents. An entirely separate building will have 100 rooms of supported housing for formerly homeless people. And not only that, but 60% of the park space will be retained when the project is complete. It's hard to see the downside of a project like this, especially in one of the most expensive areas in the country. But there's at least one potential downside. Critics point out that we really don't know if this park space and transitional housing will be used to serve the same undeniably vulnerable population that it serves today. University students were surveyed and asked a number of different questions about People's Park, and the survey says students are clearly in favor of development, though it was taken before these shipping containers showed up. I walked around campus for a while, and most of the chatter was about classes, dating, or why the football team keeps losing so many games. Most residents, the city government, and the governor of California all seem to support this project, because the housing shortage is real, not just in California or the city of Berkeley, but at the level of the university itself. Cal houses fewer students on campus than any school in the UC system. And with schools like UCLA in the system, you cannot blame Cal's urban environment. That leaves more students to find housing off campus in the community. But despite the shortage, opponents say that there are plenty of other places to build student housing that don't require destroying this truly singular park. But is this just NIMBYism? More on that later. One of the university's major concerns is that this park has become a beacon for crime. Since the start of the COVID pandemic, reported crimes around the area include 18 rapes, 19 robberies, 110 aggravated assaults, 48 drug arrests, and 6 weapons arrests. A student was stabbed when walking by in 2021, and the crimes are becoming increasingly frequent. Critics say the university has allowed this to happen. They operate multiple nuclear laboratories. Surely they can manage a tiny park. If you've seen Oppenheimer or read the wiki of Berkeley's accomplishments, then this may resonate. Another criticism of the university's handling of People's Park is how they've treated the unhoused or homeless populations that call this place their home. The start of the pandemic brought an end to the camping ban that existed in People's Park. With that came a quick increase in the number of people camping here. And the crime we just talked about followed soon after. Still, there's criticism that displacing unhoused people anywhere is cruel, especially when they don't have the means to go anywhere else. But Cal happily reported that all the people living in the park were offered housing at this motel. 21 of the 25 said, yeah, sure, we'd love that, and they now live here at the Quality Inn. And this isn't the first time this has happened. A number of people camping in the park in previous years were offered free rent in transitional housing. Many of those people are now living in permanent housing, and that's an undeniable and rare housing win for the Bay Area. But some say this misses the point completely. I spoke to some people at the Free Store who are thrilled that these 21 people have housing. But the park was used to distribute meals and health services to hundreds of people every week. Now that's gone. This was a gathering place for a community, and now I've been down here for a few hours now, and if nothing else, it feels bizarre. Closing the park before construction can legally begin seems cruel. And we don't know when or if that construction will ever happen. You may have caught me say free store and wonder what that is. A group of students and community members set up this, well, free store nearby the park. They offer free food, clothes, water, shelter from the rain, and try to fill some of the gap that's left by this now closed People's Park. I stopped by to chat for a bit and everyone there was really nice. A common criticism of Californians is that they're NIMBYs. It stands for not in my backyard. In other words, Californians talk a big game about developing more housing, but they want that housing to be built somewhere else. Not in their neighborhood, and certainly not on their historic sites. Oh yeah, People's Park is a historic site. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and though it was only added there in 2022 after years of community efforts, historic sites are often treated very differently. This designation means that People's Park is worthy of preservation, but the university says this is just an honorary designation and won't impact future development in any way. I've talked about NIMBYism before in a video about the richest town in America. In that town, billionaires are blocking development by their multi-million-dollar mansions. People's Park feels different. Opponents of the project say they're protecting a national treasure. Those in favor of development say this is just textbook NIMBYism. The case currently lies with the Supreme Court of California. The People's Park Historic District Advocacy Group has filed suit under the California Environmental Quality Act. The complaint basically says that the university failed to adequately consider other sites, and that noise from the students housed there would harm the community. Proponents of development say there's obviously no real environmental concern here. It's a vacant lot in the middle of a city. It highlights the ability of a small group of people to block almost any development in the state of California. But that's another story. It's one that's already played out across the bridge in San Francisco with the so-called Monster in the Mission. Many of the buildings that surround the park have been redeveloped since this story began. Though many historical buildings are still standing, there's a good chance that if the university hadn't botched this back in 1967, that People's Park would have never existed. Almost every article I've read and person I've spoken to has an opinion on this. The best actual reporting I've seen on it comes from the Daily Cal, SF Gate, and other regional outlets. I'm not going to take a stance on whether People's Park should or shouldn't be developed. Instead, I'm gonna let you decide. If you want to see me take a strong stance on something, then check out these videos, and hit subscribe if you want to see more. This is a heated topic in Berkeley and beyond, and I know the word California can elicit some strong emotions. Please be respectful in the comments. I will only respond if you're nice. Thanks for watching.